Welcome to episode 99 of the Lone Hockey Podcast. And today, what we're going to be talking about is yesterday's matchup between Ottawa and LA. We're going to be talking about some standouts, and the game in general was a wild game and ended up being a wild finish. It was back and forth all the time, and Ottawa ended up taking it 8-7 in overtime, so 15 goals total. Pretty crazy game. And LA has been off to an interesting start, and obviously they're dealing with some injury issues. Drew Doughty's out, and they would like to see some more production out of some of their guys, but at the same time, it's still the start of the season. It's only been 3 games, and I've seen so many different predictions on teams. It's only 3 games in. It's only you have to remember it's only 3 games, but at the same time, yesterday's matchup was really intriguing. When you look at Ottawa, and I really want to see Ottawa do better. They're one of the teams where it's like, when are you going to take the next step? You don't know when they're going to take the next step. They have a good team. They have a good core. It's just more a matter of when are they going to take that next jump. They have a bunch of good players on their team. Like you look at Josh Norrison, obviously dealing with some injury issues last year, but now he's very much in for a comeback season potentially this year. Shane Pinto could be in for a comeback season this year. And we know what he's dealt with, but it doesn't matter as long as he can tune out those distractions and make sure that he's on the right path individually. That's all that's going to matter to him. And he's been playing well to start. Josh Norris has been playing well to start. Josh Norris, in fact, had 2 goals yesterday and was really stood out or really standing out in terms of all of his play on and off the puck. Obviously, a two-way player who can play both sides of the puck, offensively, defensively, and being able to do a really good job supporting both those roles as a centerman. And at the same time, he's a guy that stands out in terms of how he's able to generate plays and how he's able to generate scoring. And a guy who's a contributor in all facets of the game. And Drake Batherson, another really big standout, 3 points in the game, a goal and 2 assists, 4 shots, and a guy who is most well known as a scorer, but he can make plays and he can make plays through small scenes when necessary, but he has that shot first mentality. And it's interesting with him, the way he shoots the puck, he can shoot from very odd stances from time to time, especially in a wider base, or he can shoot from his hip pocket, or he can shoot close to his body. He can shoot in a variety of ways, and he's a shot threat in terms of being able to change the angle and being able to be a threat in that sense. And so Batherson stood up tremendously yesterday. And then another player, Tim Stützle. I love watching Tim Stützle, and ever since his draft year, I've always enjoyed watching him. And he's been a player that he stands out in terms of perimeter play and interior space play. So he can generate both with the puck and a stick. He's a possession driver, being able to generate both. And he can walk circles around you. It's so interesting to watch him skate because he can skate for days, it seems like. He can skate around the zone for eons. It will just not stop going because he's not afraid to hold on to the puck. He's not afraid to extend possession. He's not afraid to extend ozone sequences and carry the puck individually. So he's a guy that stands out in that sense a lot of the time, and you notice him a lot of the time when he's able to drive play in that sense. And he's at best when he's able to drive possession and drive play. So he's a guy that contributes in all facets as well. And then Brady Tkachuk, speaking of a guy that contributes in all facets, including physicality on top of his two-way play, he's a leader in all senses. 3 assists yesterday, and basically this whole Ottawa team had points, and same with LA. But at the same time, it's really interesting to see which players stood out. Brady Tkachuk, always a guy that stands out, very similar reminiscence to his brother Matthew a lot of the time, and they're pretty much the same player, just different teams. And another player I wanted to touch on was Jake Sanderson. And Jake Sanderson, I've always been intrigued by his game as well. And a guy who has translated really well as a top four defenseman for Ottawa because of his ability to eat minutes, but at the same time, be a guy that can play an offensive role when necessary and be relied upon the power play, be relied upon when using his ozone instincts. He's actually really underrated when it comes to ozone instincts. And he's never been a prominent offensive defenseman per se. He's always been more of a shutdown and leans more towards the shutdown style of play. But he has a bit of offensive ability that goes a little bit unnoticed and hidden at times. And you have to dive deeper in this game to really understand it. But when you see him activating on the blue line, he's a guy that actually he moves really well laterally and he understands how to open lanes, change the angle, both on passing angles and shot angles, so he understands both really well. And then what he's able to do, he's able to execute really well. He's able to execute in terms of being a shot threat, being a playmaking threat, coming off the line, moving east-west, activating downhill. He can do it in a lot of different ways. And having Travis Green having that activation in the ozone helps in terms of systems and tactics and stuff along those lines. So Jake Sanderson is really good. He's going to be a standout defenseman throughout the season. On the LA side, Brent Clark, 3 assist game. When I was when I saw that Drew Doughty was injured to start the season, I immediately thought about Jordan Spence and Brant Clark because those are two guys you can rely upon and two guys that can potentially increase their role with Doughty out because two right shot defensemen who are looking to improve in their time in the NHL and get better and try to be consistent in their NHL play. Jordan Spence showed that last year. Brant Clark's still trying to show it now. But Brant Clark's taken major strides and looks like he could be a really good defenseman this year who could play full time with LA. And it looks as if he's ready to make that jump full time because not only just because of the game he had yesterday, but you look at the play that he's had to start the season and he's been standing out offensively. And that's what he's most gifted at is his offensive play, his patterning, his instincts, his ability to understand space and read space and be able to conceptualize what he wants to do with the puck in space. So a guy who is very much a puck possession defenseman and very engaged in transition, very engaged in the offense, very engaged in the ozone. And he's always active in the ozone. He's even more active because we talked about Jake Sanderson before, but even more active than a defenseman like that in the ozone. Like he could still walk the line laterally, still good with his crossovers, his weight shifts, his ability to use his feet simultaneously with his hands, but at the same time, he understands how to drive possession, how to move off the puck, how to be engaged down low if need be, how to pinch, how to activate, those type of things. He understands a lot of different components when it comes to the off puck play. That has really matured in his time, and I believe some of that's matured in his time through Ontario in the AHL. And he's not going to get that maturity in the OHL because he dominated the OHL, especially last year. And there's no real learning when you're dominating the league in a way. You could still learn in some ways, but you're not necessarily going to learn through domination all the time. You're going to learn through as you adapt through the pro ranks, and you're going to learn more about the maturity process in that sense. And so Brant Clark has stood out thus far with that. And another player, Kevin Fiala, a natural goal scorer. I've loved watching Kevin Fiala ever since he got traded from Nashville and he got moved from Nashville and he moved to Minnesota. He really blossomed in Minnesota, and then now moving to LA in that trade that sent Brock Faber to Minnesota. Kevin Fiala's been really good in his own right, and when you look back at the trade, it's really a win-win for both sides because Minnesota gets a premier defenseman, LA gets a premier scoring forward. Sure, could they have used Brock Faber now? Yes, but I don't believe anybody would have known at the time that Brock Faber would turn out to be what he is. And so it's a win-win trade. But with Fiala individually, you look at his game, scoring instincts, how he's just able to score around the net. He's really, really blossomed over his time in the NHL from being a checking forward to being a guy who can also check but score mainly. And that's been his focal point in his game is his scoring more than ever. You don't have to rely. He still checks a lot, but you can still rely on his game as a checker and that habit's never going to come out of his game because it's been ingrained in him ever since he started in the league. But now you look at his game and how it's transformed. His dual threat playmaking has transformed his overall play. That's what's helped him the most. That's what's allowed him to become better and be more efficient in terms of being able to drive offense and being able to drive pace of play, drive possession, being able to carry possession in the ozone. And he's been an elite driver of play as a goal scorer. I love watching him score goals because he can score goals from range because he has a tremendous wrist shot, even though he's slightly undersized, you can argue. But tremendous wrist shot, tremendous one timer. He can score in a variety of ways. He can score off the pass initially. He can score on his wrist shots, off the catch, whatever it may be. He can score in a variety of ways, slap shots as well. And he's a guy that stands out all the time. And another guy that scored twice yesterday, who I really want to talk about, he's been having a really good start to the season, Alex Laferriere. And ever since being drafted from the USHL out of Des Moines, transitioning to Harvard, and then now up through the NHL ranks, he's been really good to start the season. And I really like his style of play. He's a power forward, but also skill forward. So he blends both. And he's a guy that is that modern day power forward in a sense where he can check and he can be physical and he can use his size and he can protect the puck. But at the same time, he really understands how to play a skill game, how to play a game of scoring it around the crease, how to score from afar, how to make plays through seams and make plays diagonally, make plays laterally. And he's become more of an efficient offensive contributor thus far, and he stood out on the offensive side of the puck more than ever. So he's been good. Tanner Janot, last player I want to get to, a guy ever since being acquired from Tampa, he has really stood out because he's a guy who can move up and down your top nine, and he can play any sort of role. It can be a checking role, it can be a complementary offensive role. He's not an individual play driver offensively, but a guy who can check and score at an above average level. His scoring is above average. He's not an elite scorer by any means, but he can contribute when necessary offensively, and he can contribute in ways that other players don't want to. So he can go to areas that other players don't want to. He can score from areas that other players don't want to. You can make plays from other areas that don't other players don't want to. So a guy that's very much involved in defensive habits and the offensive side of the puck as well. And he stands out in both ways and he contributes in both ways as well. So a guy who's very prominent as a checker, but also as a scorer and his ability to create in dual threat patterns.